Hello and welcome to the Earth Observed podcast. My name is Sam and I oversee Geospatial Earth Data and Atmospheric AI staffing here at DeepRec.ai. Earth Observed is a podcast where I sit down with the founders, the technical leaders, and the minds shaping the future of Earth data, geospatial, and as mentioned, atmospheric AI across Europe, North America, and beyond. In each episode, we take a vertical dive into a topic chosen by our guest, giving you a front row seat to the ideas, the tools, and the challenges that enable innovation from space to subsurface and everything in between. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Muthu. Muthu is the co-founder at Geoawesome and a technology evangelist with over a decade of experience in the tech industry. He collaborates with industry leaders, academia, and government organizations to drive innovation and build strategic partnerships. His mission is to advocate for the transformative potential of geospatial data and technologies, creating data-driven solutions to tackle critical global challenges. Muthu, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Sam. I'm doing well. How are you?
Yes, I'm great. It's been very hot, very sunny, and I cannot complain. So all is well on my end. But tell the audience today, Muthu, give the audience a bit of a brief insight as to what we're going to talk about. Some of the pressing matters, some of the challenges, maybe some of the bits and pieces going on your end.
Sure. Thanks. First of all, for having me on the podcast. What I wanted to take the time to talk about was where are we as an organization, as Geoawesome? What are some of the challenges that I see, given my experience having worked outside of the geospatial industry as an end customer, what I perceive as chronic problems that the geospatial industry should be addressing. Then touch upon a topic that I think is on the minds of everybody, AI, and what does it mean? How do we use it for our benefit? And something that's closer to my heart, Geospatial for Good, and all the activities that we as an organization are working on, and potentially where we see also collaboration with other organizations.
Fantastic.
So that's pretty much the outline, I guess.
I'm excited for this one. I think ever since ever since we got in contact with each other, I've been following your platform for some time now. I remember when I first started out into this community, to see who the movers and the shakers were, who the leaders were. I always used to refer to your Geoawesome Global Top 100 that you would release on a yearly basis. A huge inspiration for the development of my work. And I can't thank you enough for the contribution that you have made as an individual and, of course, your team to the industry. I think it's, definitely deserves the attention. But I guess, Muthu, it's really interesting. You describe yourself as a passionate, and you said this, not me, Geo-geek. And your platform, Geoawesome, has become, as I've just mentioned, a central voice in the industry. Could you take us, the audience, back to the beginning and share the initial spark that led you to believe the world needed a platform like this? And how has that mission evolved into what it is today?
First of all, thanks a lot for the kind words about what we've been doing over the course of the last decade and more. In fact, next April, we're going to be 15. So it kind of feels like we've been around for way too long. It started out with a simple premise, and a bunch of people who graduated from their bachelor's and master's programs who wanted to have a platform to showcase our passion for the geospatial technology and what you can do with it. Because back then, the thought process was the media organizations were not doing justice to how cool this technology is and what you could do with it. Also to give ourselves as students or young graduates a platform to showcase our passion and to kind of network and meet other people as well. Of course, over the course of a decade, things change, and you also learn a lot more about your own career and where you want to be. And what we've noticed is, yes, there is a need for a media organization that tells the story of how geospatial technology is being used inside the sector, but there is also a need to transport this information in a way that people understand outside of the sector, essentially people who don't care how geospatial works, but just want to use it. want to understand how they could use it and what applications are there, and also understand what are the limitations. It's not important, and it's not just important to talk about what you can do with it, but also talk about what you can't do with it, or what is currently not possible given technology limitations. So that's in a nutshell the evolution, I guess, of Geoawesome. We also rebranded ourselves. We used to be called Geoawesomeness, which was personally a very important name for me, but I got vetoed by the team to choosing a shorter version. But yeah, I think that's for the better. I think more people can, say Geoawesome than Geoawesomeness, but that's still an
it's awesome
ongoing
nonetheless.
joke.
It's awesome nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, I love the community and all of its different, communities within, I guess, all of the different pockets of people and spaces that have been built up over the years. Kudos and a mention to the likes of women in geospatial. You've got a number of individuals playing their part, the likes of Robin Cole and his group on LinkedIn. I am definitely trying to put my part in there. I've got my own LinkedIn group, Geospatial Worldwide. Definitely need to take some tips from yourself on how to champion these groups and how to ultimately build communities from the ground up, because I'm definitely struggling in that area. But nonetheless, as long as people are trying, I think that is all that matters. And I think, you are definitely one of the kind of leaders, paving the way for people
That's
like
kind
me,
of you.
giving people like me the inspiration to continue doing what we're doing. And I guess, for many in the broader tech world, geospatial might simply mean Google Maps. And I can understand that, right? When I first started out, I used to refer back to map-based data a lot. But of course, it's so much more than that. Why do you think it's difficult for people and organizations to truly understand geospatial technology? What insights did you gain about being an end customer of geospatial technology during your time at Deutsche Bahn?
That's a great question. And that's a question that's been front and center of my career the last 5 years working at Deutsche Bahn. And Deutsche Bahn, for those of you who don't speak German, is the German railways. My role there at the beginning was to integrate satellite navigation into the signaling system and to work on a product roadmap for how we could get GNSS inside that system, which is a safety of life system, by the way. And the first thing that I realized was there were a lot of people inside the railways who just immediately said GPS does not work in tunnels. And there was this very strong basis of information that they have, which is true. GPS does not work when you don't have direct line of signals, but there are other technologies which you can use to actually mitigate this issue with INS. But the problem was a lot of the companies that were trying to sell solutions to the railways basically did not take the time to actually explain how the solution would work, did not take the time to understand the customer pain points and what actually the customer, in this case, the railways, needed. One of the most critical things that explains the difference between the railway customer and other customers is how few failures or errors you can make in your data. So when you look at your mobile phone, you see the blue dot. It can be wrong. And if it's wrong, you're frustrated. Nothing happens in terms of your safety. But whereas when you make a mistake with the blue dot in the railways, we're talking about up to 1,000 people or more dying. And this was a requirement central to the railway safety system and how you design products. And my experience was that the geospatial companies were very quick to advertise how cool the technology was and very slow to try to understand the actual pain point. There could be several reasons for this.
Yeah.
And going back to your original question, why is it that we struggle to talk about geospatial in a way that's beyond Google Maps? To my understanding and my opinion, it's mainly because of the fact that we don't try to answer the question in a way that solves a problem. And the way Google Maps sticks as such a good example is everybody understands the problem that Google Maps solves, right? You immediately get it. You know why you use Google Maps as a consumer.
Hmm.
Whereas when you try to say, oh, I work on GIS, okay, what is it? It's several layers of maps, and then I do analysis. You lose people because you're not
Yeah,
trying to talk to them in a language that they understand.
that makes sense, because in geospatial data, satellite imagery, that sort of thing is utilized frequently in areas like government and defense. All right, that's something we all know. The same goes for, as you've mentioned, railway, aviation, and so forth. But when, of course, you come to consumer products, end user products, sort of B2C markets, um, it does somewhat become a lot more complex to try and convey the convenience, the problem solving that this type of approach achieves. And I think it's so important nowadays for those players within the consumer markets to build cool technology and tooling, yes, but intuitive technology. Technology and platforms that allow people to truly understand what they're getting out of this. Because, as you've mentioned already, people then become frustrated and they are less likely to continue utilizing whatever solution that is. It's very similar to the idea of Pokemon Go. I
Yeah,
have already mentioned this elsewhere, and that ultimately, when Niantic developed it, it's a really cool, fantastic application. It's broken the charts time and time and again on the App Store, but you take away our little yellow friend of Pikachu, what's under the hood is ultimately like a large spatial database, or kind of model ultimately built on geospatial data. But when you speak to people about Pokemon Go, they just talk about the fact that it fills a gap. It lives. It allows us to live back in nostalgia. It gives us an opportunity to be active and roam the streets and the cities to capture our, favorite Pokemon. Um, so yeah, no, really, really interesting point.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that not all consumers and customers understand how geospatial works. So you've given a really nice example of Pokemon Go. People don't see it as a mapping game. I
Yeah,
mean, they get that there is a map behind it
sure.
and it works. But I think fundamentally the problem is in other cases where we don't do a good enough job as an industry explaining how we solve problems.
Yeah.
We tend to focus a bit too much on the technology. I don't think that's a geospatial special issue.
Hmm.
But since we're all geospatial people here, I think that's an issue that we need to address.
100%. 100%. Yeah, I've seen a lot of businesses now, build some really, really interesting low code, no code solutions as well. I'm a big advocate for that, um, especially for someone like myself who, believe it or not, is not technical in the slightest. To be able to comprehend and understand how to use these tools, and to kind of be part of the party. No one wants to be left out, right? So, yeah, I really appreciate that sort of thing. So I guess on the one hand, you curate, not create, but curate the influential global top 100 geospatial companies list, as I have mentioned already in the episode, offering a top-down view of the industry's biggest players. On the other hand, you're passionately building a global collaborative community from the ground up at Geoawesome. I'm really interested to know, how do these two roles of yours intersect, and what does observing the top 100 teach you about fostering a truly healthy and innovative community for everyone else?
We've been fortunate that we've had a bunch of really amazing experts helping us with the top 100.
Yeah.
So the list that we publish every year, it's not a list that Alex, my co-founder, or I decide, but rather it's a list that an expert group or panel
Yeah.
helps us decide in the end. And one of the things that I've learned from Alex from day one, he's an amazing friend and an amazing co-founder to have, is the fact that he's super collaborative. He's always on the lookout for opportunities in which we can work together. And what I bring to the table was the fact that I was always willing to experiment from day one and try out new formats. Whether it works or not, we keep trying out. And I think when you talk about building communities, it's important to give people the room to do things that they find meaningful, but give them a structure as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that they have, as a person, the ability to innovate and to create and bring people together, but don't feel like it's a one-person effort.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why I believe Geoawesome has done better and sustained for so long is the fact that we've taken a more collaborative approach, and we are two co-founders and a group of people who constantly pop up and, work on what we are trying to do as a community. Then when you're alone in this, I think that makes a difference as well. There have been many years where I had less energy and less motivation to work on Geoawesome than Alex did. And so he was able to take the burden of pushing things through, because we're not doing this full time. We're doing this in our free time, in our evenings, in our weekends. So there always was this balance. And it was much more easier for us to also work together with organizations like Women in Geospatial, Sisters of SAR, Ladies of Landsat, and experiment with them, try different things with them. Do I wish that we could do more with them? Of course, but I also understand that every organization has its unique focus.
Sure.
And in terms of building communities and working with them, my personal experience has always been to go where conversations take you and give people a platform to talk about what they want to discuss. We're doing a series right now on entrepreneurs and their experience building companies. And the reason it even started was because we kind of spoke to one founder and he said, hey, there is no platform for us to learn from the experience of other founders. And then we had conversations with 10 other startup founders out of Europe, basically realized that this was something that all of them were wishing. And voila, now you have got a series of digital events. I mean, we are hosting the next one in September. And there's no commercial angle to this, right? This is just about having a conversation, just about having fun. I think that's one of the keys to building a community as well. I think sometimes you just have to leave the commercial angle out of it. I mean, you're doing it right now. You're talking to me. There's no commercial angle to it. I'm not paying you anything, or at least there's no benefit for you to talk to me. So I guess that's the key, just have conversations, help people network with other people, and then voila, you have it.
Absolutely. So I've been having a look at some of your work recently as well. Obviously, you're very vocal on LinkedIn, which is brilliant. I've really enjoyed some of reading some of your content. You recently wrote an interesting article, and it was titled "Will AI Eat Geospatial?" You're making me hungry. It's a provocative question many founders are asking about their own industries. From your vantage point, is AI a threat, a tool, or something else entirely for the geospatial world? And additionally, how do you envision integrating AI at and within a community such as Geoawesome?
So let me start with the later question and then move on to the more general AI conversation. So one thing is clear. Large language models have made it way easier to create content, and have also, to a very large extent, changed the way we search for information on the internet. Up until a couple of months ago, majority of the traffic that we were receiving as a website as Geoawesome was coming through the Google search engine. Now that's changed. That percentage is decreasing, and it's decreasing every month. And we are seeing ChatGPT as one of the top 10 sources for redirects and referrals to the website, but it's nowhere close to the number of page visits we were receiving through Google. And I think this is going to be something that accelerates. You see other organizations, big organizations as well, identifying this as something that's going to happen, and that their traffic is going to decrease way more than it has so far.
Yeah.
There are a couple of different ways in which we can go about it. One would be to say we double down and try to create as much as content as we can using AI. So we would then dilute the quality we produce, or we continue to do what we've done so far and what we did a couple of years ago, which was to shift away from more news articles to more in-depth expert content that takes time to write. And in that sense, we are going to continue focusing more on these expert content, focusing more on these in-depth articles rather than creating very quick and short posts using AI. Naturally, that means for us as an organization, we need to identify ways in which we can better connect with our readers, connect with our audience, whether that's through reports, whether that's through digital events. We are working on those. So we're kind of experimenting with a bunch of different ways in which we can continue to engage with the audience in a direct way. Funny enough, newsletter seems to be an amazingly good way to reach people. I would have never thought that emails survive, but they seem to be thriving.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, as Geoawesome, that's where we are. We are trying to see how do we sustain ourselves and make sure that we're not going to die out because Google doesn't bring us any results anymore.
Yeah.
And,
no, I do agree with that. I think, for me personally and my experiences, I like email. I still rely on email myself to to get my fix of content. I have Google Alerts set up. It comes through to my email address. But when I'm actually putting stuff out to people in terms of outbound, it's the deliverability and getting past the walls as such. The more and more technology that is being implemented into these, I guess, email systems. I'm just going to speak very plainly here. The more security there is, and the less, well, for me and my experience, my deliverability has gone down massively. I also am concerned about the search engine versus the language model. When I want to get some quick answers, I am finding myself still fighting between the likes of ChatGPT and Google, and then by extension Gemini, because a lot of the time, the quickest, the most efficient result will come up at the top of the page, generated by Gemini. But in a year's time, let's say, maybe not even that, maybe even 6 months' time, I'm trying to establish whether Google in my world is going to become redundant. I don't know. So it really is an interesting perspective from someone like yourself with the content you're pushing out, the community that you're trying to build, and what you're trying to do over at Geoawesome.
I mean, it's going to change, or it has already changed. And my theory is that you're not going to search for information the way you're doing it right now.
Yeah.
I don't do it. The number of times I actually open up DuckDuckGo, the search engine that I use, versus the number of times I go to Gemini or ChatGPT to get information is massive.
Yeah.
I don't look for information the way I did 6 months ago. And therefore, I get that other people are not going to do the same. So if you accidentally discovered Geoawesome in the past because you wanted to read an expert content on mining, you're not going to be able to do that anymore because it's going to be hidden in one of the 10 sources that ChatGPT or Gemini used to create that answer.
Sure.
And so the way you also measure success as a content creator is not potentially going to be through page visits anymore. And that's the other thing. I don't know if you've noticed it as well. What we've noticed is the number of page visits has decreased. And interestingly, the time spent on the website has increased by 1.5 minutes. 1.5 minutes on a website, that's significantly higher than what you would assume.
So
I think people are spending more time reading content. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. What I was going to say was, and apologies for interrupting there, is that the visits to your page, yes, have come down, but the session time has gone up. And that could suggest that actually the quality of the lead or the user, the viewer, however you want to define it, is getting much better. It's much more appropriate.
Yeah.
It's much more valuable. I guess long are the days of vanity metrics in impressions and clicks and page visits, etc., etc. But looking at really valuable metrics like session time, and also dissecting that even further, trying to understand, okay, they're spending this amount of time on the site or wherever.
Yeah.
Where on the site are they active? Where are they hanging out? Where can I go to try and get as much data as possible? Is it this page or that page? Where are they landing, etc.? So, I guess the way in which we view results, as you've mentioned, how we measure things is not just in geospatial, but across the board. It's going to change the way in which we are consuming content. Um, you know, I can't even remember before TikTok came along how I would get my kind of daily fix of entertainment. I remember IGTV used to be a thing, but that was short lived. We now have Reels. We've now got, being able to kind of repost Reels. I think that's a really interesting feature. So, how they're tapping into I guess, the human behaviors and they're doing this at a very, very quick rate as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting point that you've made there. And it's definitely got
Yeah,
me thinking.
and it's gonna become more important for companies to, speak in a language that their customer understands,
Yeah.
because you're not going to get the same audience as you were before. And I think it's also going to become more important to have a community focus,
Do
right?
you
I think
think
these
that
are
it's
the two pillars.
do you think that it's lazy though? And what I mean by that is, like, if something hasn't like given us some form of feeling within like 5 seconds, we like either swipe or move on. Or do you feel like our attention spans have pretty much diminished and just are now pretty much non-existent? Do you think our expectations are far too high for what we're consuming? And I guess, how does this shape this aggressive evolvement of the media landscape? Because it is, for me, it's quite concerning.
There was a report by, I think it was McKinsey, where they looked into attention spans and also identified possible channels in which you can actually communicate your message. And interestingly, it's not rocket science. Yes, our attention spans are decreasing across the board, across age groups. And yes, we are consuming more short form content than we did in the past. And I'm sure you've had this as well. When you release a podcast episode on YouTube, you probably get, let's say, 2,000 views on one. You release the same podcast episode as a short, you're going to get 2,000 views on the short.
Yeah.
And even the way that Google measures success for a short video is 10, 20, 30 times with a higher bar than it does for a long form video. So I think that also tells us that, our attention spans have significantly decreased. I think it's going to get better when people realize that they need to spend more time to read things, whether that's reading books, whether that's reading reports, or whether that's watching a long form content.
Mm.
I certainly realize it myself, and I still struggle when I start reading a book with the first, the second, and the third page, because it takes you that 5-10 minutes to get in. But sometimes when you start reading that book, then it becomes a bit more easier. So I think it's a question of practice. So even the McKinsey report that I was mentioning, I will try to make sure that I give you the link so that you can put it in the description. It was quite positive in terms of what kind of content you can generate so that people watch it. So there is still hope. I don't think we're goldfish yet.
It sometimes feels that way. And it's as if we're having to strip ourselves down and rebuild ourselves back up again. Go back to the basics to pretty much reprogram ourselves. And I guess that's where the concern comes from for me. We see it in films and TV series, these, evolutions, these very futuristic forms of media and what it could potentially do to us. I think it's Black Mirror on Netflix. They depict this incredibly well, in my opinion. The writing behind some of those episodes is incredible. But anyway, I don't want to digress too much. A cool thing
No
with this
worries.
podcast is leveraging deep technology to solve complex problems. Okay, at Geoawesome, you champion the idea of geospatial for good. You mentioned this earlier. Beyond commercial applications, where do you see this technology making the most significant positive impact on humanity and society?
So I'm going to take you on a small journey here. So I'm from the south of India, from a city called Chennai, or Madras, which was the old name.
Yeah.
And if you look at the history of post-independence India, the impact of satellite imagery is huge.
Right.
Pre-satellite imagery, you had at least 1 million people displaced every time that there was a cyclone. We're
Right.
talking about huge cyclones, not the smaller ones.
Okay.
And since we've got satellite imagery, since we've got nations sharing weather data, we're not talking about 1 million people being displaced anymore. We're probably talking about 1,000 people being displaced.
Right.
So just from the get-go, you have this massive impact in terms of how many people are getting not displaced and how many people's lives are being saved through this technology. And this is just one small example that comes to my mind. There are tons and tons of other examples. And I'm not saying that geospatial doesn't have its challenges. And I think the challenges in terms of contributing for the 17 UN Sustainability Development Goals is rather in the scalability, not in its potential. I think very often where we end up having issue with geospatial is that we don't end up scaling it to the last centimeter or to the last point. The example with the weather systems is a situation where we've scaled it, where it's become part of our life, where we're doing really good work across the globe. And so that's the one aspect. And so we are in the middle of working together with a couple of our colleagues from the community to release a report on how geospatial is being used across these 17 UN Sustainability Development Goals, different examples, and also where we see the challenges are and where we see the opportunities are. That's very important for me personally, because that was what motivated me to get into this industry. This whole aspect of how a single picture can make a huge difference to somebody's life, whether or not that person understands geospatial. That's just massive. And given the state of affairs in the world, given how many challenges we face, but without having to even name any of them, I think we are certainly going to have to do a better job as geospatial people to not only explain what we can do and make sure that these applications are understandable, but also in terms of scaling up these solutions and making sure more people can benefit from the technology.
I was about to mention that is, okay, you've got an understanding of the technology. Now it's about distribution and accessibility.
Yeah.
Especially to those, less economically developed countries, and how important it is in those deprived areas for them to be able to gain access to such data, to be able to plan, to mitigate risk, to ultimately save lives. That's really good. Really, really good. Well, look, Muthu, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on today's episode. Some very, very interesting topics, a diverse range of topics discussed there. And I would love to have you back on in the next 6 months to see where you're at, what developments have you made over at Geoawesome, and you yourself personally, where you're at, where you're working, and some of the challenges that you're solving at that point in time. Any final words?
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. And I must admit, it's a bit different from being the one who gets to interview people. I think the one thing that I would like to say is keep doing what you're doing. It's incredibly important. The number of independent media organizations, independent influencers, for the lack of a better term, has slightly decreased in the geospatial sector. So I'm glad that you have stepped up and playing this role that you're playing. So that's
Thank
really
you.
fantastic. And yeah, I'm more than happy to join you in 6 months and see where things take us.
Absolutely, without a doubt. The invitation's already there. It has been an absolute pleasure. Hello, and thank you for watching today's episode of Earth Observed, powered by DeepRec.ai. If you're interested in joining me for an episode of your own to discuss a topic of your choice, do get in contact with me. And of course, if you are looking to scale your team within geospatial, Earth data, or atmospheric AI, please do get in contact. I'd love to understand how I can support you. Until next time, have a great day.